All right, everybody, welcome back to Hardpoints, the podcast about energy security and the startup economy, how they intersect to shape the world around you. Each week, we unpack the real dynamics behind the headlines, what's changing, what it means, and why it matters to you. Thanks for being here. Neal, it's good to see you, man. It's only been like about 10 minutes, I think, since I last saw you.
It was good, man. We got to hang out in person. You're just a 2D face.
That's right. IRL. That was you and me.
Yeah, it was good to see you.
Yeah, it was good to see you as well. For those that are unfamiliar with what we're talking about, Neal and I both coincidentally happen to be in Jackson Hole, Wyoming this weekend for a nice little bit of skiing.
Yeah,
it was good.
I had more luggage than you.
Yeah, you did. For me, it was a guy's weekend. For you, it was a family weekend, and those are two horses of very different colors.
Well, I appreciate you lending some of your dad skills to my son as he was trying to navigate the blues for the first time.
Yeah,
appreciate that.
In his defense, the ranking system that they have for the trails there at Jackson Hole are, they're a little aggressive, I would say. The blues there are a little stronger of a blue than they have like this double blue system, and some of those are really properly blacks at most other hills.
Yeah. Well, for the audience, I have two boys, 11 and 8. The 8-year-old was freaking out, so I had him sort of between my legs, helping him get down the mountain, and my 11-year-old Mike cheerfully coached down the mountain, and he's more capable, but was still pretty freaked out. So we all survived in one piece. It was, in addition to being steep, it was also not the best conditions. The snow was a bit light, so it was a bit icy in parts, and that too. So
yeah, 100%.
Thank you.
The other part about Jackson Hole is it kind of feels like you're on the edge of the world, because like the Tetons just rise straight up out of the floor there of the valley, and so like you just feel like you're like peering over the edge of the precipice, even though it may be a grade that's appropriate to the ranking of the run.
Yeah. Well, but the victory came the next day. I went up with my older boy again, and he crushed it. He went up, back up to the blues, and was just more confident and jumping off stuff. And by the end of the weekend, he's like, I got these things. I'm all good. So that was nice to see the progression.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was a weekend of skiing, whiskey, and meat. And so the skiing was fairly healthy, but the rest of it was a little bit like I need a detox a little bit. So happy to be home to have a little bit of my wife's cooking and less alcohol.
Fair enough. You gotta. That sounds like fun though, man. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's important for a guy to maintain social relationships, and like this is actually one of my oldest friends, a guy named Nate, who I knew in high school, and he's just a great guy, and he keeps putting these things together, and you can find all these excuses of why you can't do it, because like your life's busy and you want to be a present father and husband and all the rest of it, but like sometimes you just got to go do these things to take care of yourself and to remember who that part of your person is as well.
Yeah. Hey, does he do these in different places every year?
He does. Last year it was in Crested Butte. This year was Jackson Hole. We're talking about Telluride next year.
Wow, that's a good friend. The person in your friend group who is the catalyst. That's super valuable.
He's just a solid guy. He and I don't totally agree on things politically, but it's nice to kind of keep those relationships too, right?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Right on, man.
Well, for the listener at home, this is going to be a new format that we're moving forward with, a little experiment that Neal and I are trying. If you don't like it, or if you love it, or anything of the above, go ahead and hit us up at an email, hardpoints.show@gmail.com, hardpoints.show@gmail.com. What we're going to be doing is, we are the podcast about energy, national security, or the startup economy. We like to talk to each other, so we're going to stop doing that as much because the podcasts were getting a little bit long. And so each week, we're going to try something a little different. We're going to try one of them. We're going to pick a subject matter and talk about a thing of that. And we're going to be coming to you a little bit more frequently as well. So if you have any things that you'd like us to talk about, to kind of work into the loop there, it's going to be a little bit more frequent. We can go ahead and address that a little bit more often. So you'll want to hit us up at, again, hardpoints.show@gmail.com. Neal, you want to kick us off this week? What are we talking about?
Yeah, this week it's energy. We picked, and I mean, it wasn't just random, I guess, because we talk about energy, national security, and the startup economy. We just started with the first topic also because there's a huge announcement this week that the global energy investment world is now $2.3 trillion. That was 2025 numbers, which is a massive, 8% year over year growth. It was already massive. And, for the last decade or so, we've sort of known that if we were going to engage in this energy transition, that it was going to take a lot of capital in the trillions. And I think there was a lot of skepticism that that capital would be mobilized. But that is a huge number. $2.3 trillion in 2025 is impressive.
Yeah, it's I can't even remember like how big the global economy is, but like 2.3 trillion is a not small percentage of that. I mean, I want to say it's like somewhere in like 10%. Don't quote me on that, but like a huge chunk of the global economy is going into effectively energy and climate tech, and that's just like from a climate guy, like that's a really encouraging number. But it also is like it's worth kind of like pulling that apart and kind of learning a little bit about like what's going on there and like why some of those things are happening. The one thing that you and I were thinking about talking about is batteries here. Um, they're becoming increasingly important for energy, now security. They were invested in under the Biden administration, under the Inflation Reduction Act or the IRA. Trump administration's pulled them back, but like they are marching forward. What's your experience about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've said it before on the show, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that was the big climate bill under the Biden administration, had subsidies for wind, solar, storage. Storage includes batteries, and a bunch of other things like nuclear and geothermal, et cetera. And as we've said before, uh, the two most visible items in that list got pulled out of the IRA or whatever the subsidy structure, but batteries remained. So did the subsidy support for nuclear, geothermal, and other things. Um, and it's sort of like I would give the administration a little bit of credit here. There's a deeper recognition about supply chain risks, specifically when it comes to critical minerals. And so the Trump administration announced recently a $12 billion strategic stockpile of critical minerals. That's lithium, it's nickel,
Is it
it's rare
Greenland?
earths. I don't know if it includes Greenland or not. Um, but look, I think we've all learned over the last, I speak for myself, over the last decade or so, that it's one thing to build the critical parts of the value chain, but you also have to think about where critical vulnerabilities are. And if you need to build national security apparatus, which includes basically everything in energy, you've got to have the supply chain to do it. So securing these critical minerals and the battery supply chain, I think is pretty smart.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's applications beyond the batteries as well. Again, all that kind of tied into this huge and growing market around renewable and clean energy more broadly. And so this does kind of feed into the the energy dominance narrative associated with that. Um, it makes me think a little bit about like a couple of things. So one is my friend Tim, who runs a small venture firm. You know Tim too. Around critical minerals, and like this is like he is just like at the perfect intersection right now because of the angles around national security and the end of the defense industry that are starting to clamor for this stuff, and at the same time that the clean energy and climate focused sector is going for it, and both of them need this. So I'm just really proud of like how prescient he was about that, and apparently things are going well for him over there at Nomadic Venture Partners. If anybody wants to give him a look, but the other part about it is like, is this the right way to protect that national security interest, right? So Like, as like a stockpiling of minerals means that it's still probably not being like produced here, right? This is more of like a kind of like a oil embargoes mindset, like when we created a strategic petroleum reserve. Um, and so, oh well, the Saudis were producing all the oil, therefore we have to store it just in case OPEC, decides to hold us under their thumb. So I wonder, is there actually a capacity for domestic mining, that for expanding that capacity? Because we definitely have some of the mineral reserves that could be used for this. And have you heard anybody talking about that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. There are mines. We have this in the under the surface of the United States. Uh, we had an open operating mine about a decade ago, but we shut it down for environmental reasons. And this is, I think, a core part of. I think it's a healthy debate between having the ability to support the green economy, the energy transition, while also protecting the natural resources that you have and not polluting water and not destroying habitat. So I think, I hope it's, I think I probably throw up my hands and it's probably false hope, but I have hope that we're going to see the pendulum swing back to a more reasonable middle rather than just shutting projects down and not finding reasonable environmental protections. I think this administration, at least if you listen to their rhetoric, is just going to open the spigot wide open and ignore many of the environmental protections. But that's still to be seen. It hasn't happened yet. Just sort of, I'm personally skeptical.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's an important thing that like people actually see the damage that their choices cause as well. So like if there was some domestic mining, people like should face the pit mine a little bit and be like, oh, hey, actually, this is the cost of me buying this extravagance. Maybe I don't need an extravagance. Maybe I want this instead. Um, the other thing that kind of makes me roll around in my head a little bit is the idea of um, minerals, unlike petroleum, are not always a consumable. They can be recycled. And so, like petroleum, when you use it, it just turns into either plastic pollution or air pollution. But it's just pollution at the end of the day. Like there's not much beyond that. But with minerals and battery technology specifically, it can be recycled, and that's improving and expanding, and not just recycled, but also like repurposed and reused. You know what have what's your experience with that? You're more the energy, renewable energy guy than I am, and batteries definitely fit into kind of that story.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the really, I would say, promising elements of the energy transition is that there is more recyclability. There's a couple of big companies out there that have been super well funded. A couple of founders that came out of Tesla and formed companies like Redwood Materials. There's several companies out there, but Redwood is one of the biggest. They just got an expanded funding round of about 425 million.
No big deal.
Um, yeah, oh my gosh, we're, I think Acclimate's going to do that on the next round, right? I mean, or maybe 426. Just do them one
I
better.
mean, if I'm being conservative, it'll only be 425 million.
um, but look, I mean, these materials are recyclable. You don't. I mean, to your point about plastic, my boy asked me the other day, like, why do we care about creating plastic? My answer is like, because you create that plastic bottle, it's gonna be around for a long time in that form. It's not gonna break down and be part of the cycle of life. It's just gonna sit in a landfill for many, many decades. Um, the counter to that is if you want lithium, like Redwood has one of a few different approaches to taking a battery, breaking it down. I mean, this is a many step process, but you have to have sorting capabilities. So you get like for like into a pile, and then you've got to go through a series of mashing and heating to get to the sort of materials that you want. At the end of the day, you end up with what I've been told is a black goop, and that black goop then can be separated out into the lithium and nickel, et cetera. Now, it's right now pretty expensive. The sorting is really hard. I think it's going to get better with AI. But once you get the black goop, you can separate out the nickel and the lithium and other things. It's pretty expensive because you've got that sorting process is difficult, and it's actually more difficult than you might imagine to get like for like. So that when you do run these processes, they're automated. But in any case, as we bring the cost down, and the volume increases, you'll get to a place where you can actually take a battery, use it for its full life, repurpose it into something less taxing, like energy storage, rather than like you could take a car battery, repurpose it into energy storage, and then when it's done with that lifetime, you could then grind it up, melt it up, and use the raw materials again. So we could get to a place where we truly are on a sustainable path. And I think that's what Redwood is trying to do. But they're raising a lot of money in part because their current operation isn't profitable. So
Yeah,
we got to keep an eye on that space.
there's kind of a Moore's law that's happening with a lot of so those unfamiliar Moore's laws where like the cost of computing power and goes down exponentially over, I think it's like every 18 months it cuts in half. So for every byte of calculation that you're doing there, the cost of it will be 50% less 18 months from now. And that has been very consistent for years and years and years. The same sort of thing has happened to a lesser extent in renewables, where solar power has gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. That curve's starting to flatten out a little bit, so we'll see about that. But batteries are on the steep part of the curve right now, really getting a lot cheaper every year, and so that's really changing a lot. AI is kind of tying into this because the one of the fastest ways that you can get power generation online right now is through renewables. And the problem with renewables has historically been their variance. But if you can have cheap battery technology that plugs into that, then you can have like you can have high stability, really controlled power sources, because like the power coming out of batteries is a lot cleaner than what you even get off of the grid. And so there's like some interesting stuff that's starting to happen here about the economics of development associated with all this, products that are getting cheaper and cheaper, and the economies of scale. So we'll see where this is all going. It does tie into some of our national security stuff for that. One of the things that you brought up was Ford's deal with China. Cattle, is that what it is? CATL?
CATL. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, look, I mean, making a battery is complicated. It's something that's, you don't just stand up, even if you're Ford, you don't just stand up a battery production facility overnight. So Ford did what was rational. They found an expert in the field. The biggest company on earth is a Chinese company called CATL. They make big batteries, medium-sized batteries, et cetera. And they did a deal with CATL to set up a factory in the U.S. Not unlike what other automakers brought in Koreans. That was actually part of an ICE raid a couple of months ago.
God,
where
that fucking mess.
it was a total mess. But look, I mean, it's because building batteries is hard, and you got to have some level of expertise to at least set up the initial operations. And look, but then Ford put a bunch of money into that, and then lawmakers decided it was too risky, and nixed the deal. And eventually, there was a compromise found, but it not without a bunch of heartburn along the way.
Yeah, one of the things that businesses hate, like they love like incentives, right? That helps to kind of do certain things, especially that kind of aligns with the direction they'd like to go. But the thing they hate most on is uncertainty, especially regulatory uncertainty. That this whipsawing back and forth of all that, the push of the IRA, which I think was in the public good, and then the cutback for like not sure reasons.
Yeah.
The regulatory, like the ICE rate itself there was no reason for like legal reason at all for ICE to go after all of these Koreans and cause this international incident, because these Koreans were invited into our country in order to be able to do this sort of thing and had, government approval and. So it was just like all the uncertainty about it, like how do you actually even build industry to move forward? So it doesn't surprise me that CATL, ended up kind of on the horns of the dilemma there. But what other? Go ahead.
I was going to say I would draw a parallel here with Huawei. If you remember 5-6 years ago, Huawei was building communications equipment that was used in our cell tower infrastructure. And there was some, let's just call it funny business going on with that. Well documented. The US government decided, it was first in the Obama administration, carried out by the first Trump administration, to basically kick Huawei hardware off of that critical communications infrastructure. Right? It seems to me that we're headed in the same direction with batteries and other critical energy infrastructure. I think part of this, though, is an education. The reason we found a sort of middle ground with the Ford CATL situation is that, some of battery infrastructure is totally dumb. Just to give you kind of a simplistic architecture here, batteries are made up of dumb cells. It's just think of it like a big AA battery. They're most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are these cylindrical base units that are then made into modules. And so you get a bunch of small cells that make a module. That module oftentimes will have a layer of firmware, which is to say software. That's where it gets a little dicey. If you have just hardware, it's pretty hard to sabotage that. But as soon as you have a layer of software, you can put a communication device that can go all the way back to Beijing, and then you can control what's happening with that battery or that infrastructure. But the lawmakers need to get smart about where to intercede here. Like we do think we should be thinking about national security with respect to batteries and all energy infrastructure. But where to insert themselves is the question. I think you can make you can make cells in China. They've got the raw materials. They got a very they sort of successfully gotten the cost out of the production of those cells. You can make them into modules even, but as soon as you put that layer of firmware on, that's, I think, where you've got to have a control there that either needs to be non-Chinese or otherwise protected. So that is an open question. I don't think lawmakers first understand how batteries are made, and they have not interjected. Parts of the U.S. military infrastructure has sort of cut off where we're going to allow firmware to be and not. I think it's likely that the rest of the civilian energy infrastructure ends up going the way of Huawei, which is to say you sort of eliminate a Chinese company from directly having access to that critical infrastructure.
Of course, the big thing that we look here is like also around the tariffs associated with this, right? If it's being manufactured in China and being imported in the U.S., like that's the heaviest like tariff burden kind of on the planet.
Ooh, yeah.
And so, what is the cost to the American consumer for being able to do this? What's the drag on the U.S. economy for those AI data centers that may be wanting to, stabilize their power supply? Like if that's all coming through China right now, and we don't have the capacity to build that yet, like how long would it take to build that up? Years, best case. So now it is definitionally a short-term drag on the economy.
Oh, it definitely is. It's also a national security concern. I mean, like, think about how the military is electrifying. This is drones, air, land, and sea, above sea, below sea. I mean, like, it's everything. It's even special forces, right? Like, they've got to carry batteries in order to operate all of the electrical stuff that they have to bring into the battle space nowadays. So it's just, as we electrify, batteries are going to become more and more important.
Yeah. And so there's obviously this balance that we have to have about like preserving, national security from the angle of, signals intelligence and making sure that we're controlling how much they have access to our critical infrastructure. But the flip of it is you can do that without having to also put the additional burden of tariffs on top of that and then cause even further problems, right? And so, I'd be happy to have the Chinese build our infrastructure up. And I don't think tariffs would be the way for us to build manufacturing capacity. So, we're kind of doing, in my opinion, the wrong thing on both sides here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the tariffs aren't actually doing what at least they're overtly intended to do. Right? The manufacturing is not really reshoring. We'll save that for another episode. But we have not seen the reshoring of manufacturing because of the tariffs.
Well, I mean, the other part of it, the tariffs, is because they're so. Again, it goes to the instability side of things. Like, I actually think there might be a chance that you might see a little bit of reshoring of industrial capacity. Um, but you'd have to have like something that businesses can plan for. And if you can't plan for that, then you can't build an economic model. If you can't build an economic model, the most prudent, appropriate thing for you to do is sit and wait until it stabilizes. Um, and there's just not enough of an opportunity there for you to take the risk of the regulatory being all over the place to, invest a bunch of money to do that. So that's where we're at. Well, so we've been at this for about 20 minutes. Like I said, we're going to be doing this as a shorter show moving forward. But as the listener here, again, at this point of the show, we would like to go ahead and take and answer some questions there, maybe have a reader mailbag. So again, please, if you can, send us some questions. Hardpoints.show@gmail.com. Hardpoints, HARDPOINTS.show, SHOW @gmail.com. And Neal and I will answer them, make fun of them, cry, laugh. I'm not sure. We'll figure out what's going on with the questions that we get, but please hit us up. Neal, let's go to the good, bads, and others, man. What are you doing? What's good in your life?
Yeah, I mean, the family time in Wyoming was amazing. That's my good. It's at the top of the list. It's way, way, way at the top of the list. The bad, how could you not highlight Minnesota as the bad? It is truly a low point, at least in my life, for what authoritarianism looks like.
Yeah, there was
you
this.
have agents of this.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, when you have agents of the state gunning down citizens in the streets, where have we gotten to? I think it's really also ironic to see, the fracturing of the arguments here. You have somebody who's legally carrying a gun, has a concealed carry permit, who didn't actually have that gun out, and you immediately see people criticizing him for going to a protest with a gun. I'm like, people that were once united behind the Second Amendment are having to come out and say, like, actually, you know what? He was doing the right thing. All of the things we've been arguing for the Second Amendment for the last 20 years, went longer than that even. So I'm watching that really, really closely. And the backlash, that's my other is, I think I'm finally starting to see some of the folks that, I've been trying to sound the alarm bells for, actually come around and say, yeah, this is too far.
Yeah, there was a pretty good skit on Saturday Night Live where there was a mom that was like, I think I need to speak up and say that he's gone too far, and her kids like flip out, and she's like, no, you got to listen to me. And and the father is like, no, listen to your mother. And she goes like, nobody could have seen this, and all the kids are like biting their knuckles because like, yeah, you could have fucking seen this, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, the larger point stands, like, agents of the government are denying American citizens and other people protected by the U.S. Constitution, which is everybody inside the United States, here legally or not. They're denying them their First, Second, and Fourth Amendment rights, and that's happening every day in so many ways that are not even being demonstrated or reported in the news because it's happening so frequently. I had a customer actually talking about how her kid's teacher got snatched. The kid, the guy was married to an American, had a fathered an American citizen, was in the process of doing all the paperwork. I said, nope, not good enough. Rolled him up, took him away, broke up that family, and also denied all those children their education. Because like, how do you find a teacher mid school year for that sort of thing? Like, that's happening too, and that's not being reported in the news, and it's horrifying. And literally the only thing I can do is pray to God that people wake up. There's only so much you and I can say at this point. It's like the government is showing exactly what they're doing, and I need everybody to wake up and to stop listening to whatever fucking shitty source they're listening to that convinces them that something like this is anywhere close to okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
For me, my good was skiing. It's always good to have like a little guy's weekend. It only happens for me once a year. It was intense, man. We woke up early on Thursday, like 3:30 in the morning, to drive from Denver to Jackson Hole. Skied that day. Skied Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Did a full day on Sunday, and then drove home last night. Got late, so
That's crazy. But good on you.
yeah,
Good
it was
on
good. It was good, and Jackson's a big mountain, so it was a lot of fun to kind of go experience that. For me, the bad is I'm going to be traveling again, actually, starting tomorrow morning very early. So I'm
Oh
going,
boy.
yeah. So I'm going to a conference. I'll be out for about 36 hours, full tilt boogie. So I think
Good luck.
yeah, this coming weekend I'm going to be spending a lot of quiet time with the family. The other for me is the Epstein files. This is just like it. I, sometimes I think that like what they're doing in Minnesota is just to distract from like how awful a person Donald Trump is.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Which is, so let's rend the fabric of American society in order to hide the fact that like we have like one of the worst people on the planet in the most powerful position on the planet. And so, if you've been tracking along here, a lot of people were talking about Epstein didn't kill himself. And there was this whole kind of meme-ish sort of thing that was happening during like the Biden administration, like as if there was somehow was like Hillary Clinton's fault or Biden or something. Like none of it made sense, even though the guy died or was killed, depending on who you think, during the Trump one. Anyway, so, people have been, forward. That has gotten stuck in kind of the conservative mindset of like things that they actually care about, even though now the shoe is very clearly on the other foot. Always was, because there were so many videos of him hanging out with the guy. And, so conservatives, a few conservatives banded together with Democrats in order to push this out and say that the files needed to be released by the Department of Justice. That has been ignored now for like 45 days, something like that. A long time. Again, we don't seem to care about law in this country anymore, except for when it punishes people that like might have some bad paperwork from 20 years ago. But in this particular case, something is still continuing to leak out there, and the stuff that's leaking is horrid. Like talking about like sexually assaulting, girls, 13-year-olds. While other people, there's like some stuff that like some files that have been released where they've kind of redacted who was from, but
Well,
it was
they've redacted almost everything. I mean, I shouldn't say everything, but no, they did it. Maybe you were on the mountain. They released another 3.5 million documents. There's supposed to be 6 million or something. So they haven't released everything, but they did a full press campaign on the Sunday morning talk shows talking about how we've released everything, when you've done the counting, they haven't.
basic math.
Full pages. Yeah. The full pages are redacted. They've done their very best to redact the rich people who are named, but then they didn't cover up the names of several victims. Look, if anybody hot take, this is not really a hot take, but I'll claim it as one, is like Trump, remember when Trump flipped, he didn't want them released, and then he said, yes, I'm gonna support it because Congress was gonna pass it one way or the other.
Yep.
Clearly their plan was to agree to release them, but just redact the shit out of it. Because now what you've got is a basically useless document. And even with that, there's a bunch of bad shit in there. There's like so much bad shit, which is what you were just talking about, 13-year-old girls and just like blatant abuse. Trump's named in there over 1,000 times. Like it's disgusting. And it's, if you think it's over, if they think it's over, I don't believe it. I don't think the public is going to be satisfied with it. We'll see, but I don't think so.
Again, all I can do is just like pray to God that Americans wake the fuck up and pay attention to like it's in plain sight. Like it's in black and white. It's literally written down in documents held by the government. And it's obvious, and you have video of the guy partying and dancing with him. flying on his fucking airplane. So, that's my other is like, are we at this point with Epstein and Minnesota where Americans have finally had enough and where they've been shown enough, and it breaks through the noise of whatever bullshit media ecosystem that they are that tells them that like supporting this bullshit is somehow okay? Well, we're going to find out. And I'm going to keep praying that that's what's going to happen, because this fucking disease needs to be cured. So, anyways, on that cheery note, that's it for this episode of Hardpoints. Thanks for listening and for being part of the conversation around energy, national security, and the startup economy. If you have a question or comment about today's show, please send us an email at hardpoints.show@gmail.com, and we may feature it on a future episode. In addition, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcast, share it on social media, or send it to someone who would appreciate it. Maybe do all three. Thanks again for joining us. Hardpoints is brought to you by the Valor Media Network. See you next time.